What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Stereotherapy. I'm your host, Lisa, and as always, I have the wonderful Justine with me. If it's your first time here, this podcast showcases the importance of music and mental health. We will often share our own stories as well as have some wonderful guests to stop by and share their own stories with us. Remember, if you're liking what you are hearing, to share, like, and subscribe to our podcast. It would really mean a lot to Justine and I. And thank you to anyone that has already done so. You can also head over to our website at www.stereotherapypod.com. You can read our blogs, check out the playlist, and just say hi. And yes, I'm behind on a blog, but it will be up this weekend. Today is a very special episode and one we have really been looking forward to for a very long time. We are going to discuss the importance of Slipknot. And I know what you're thinking. Two girls talking Slipknot. And you're probably sitting there already ready to turn it off, but don't turn it off. This is happening, and I promise we will do this incredible band justice. It is so important to highlight all genres because often times the metal genre or just hard music or whatever you want to call it, heavy music, just gets such a bad rap. And in reality, the music of Slipknot and others has truly saved and impacted so many over the years and continues to do so. So before we get into this fun episode and one we've been wanting to do, Justine, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm tired, but that's just an always constant thing. But how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm tired too. I was in the hot sun all day, and that's not a me thing at all. And I'm just like, oh, this summer is not for me. And it's only getting hotter here in Jersey. So I'm ready for fall. So just hanging. But it's good. It's good. And I want to thank everybody too that's been listening to the podcast so far and enjoying it. And I really hope what you take from this episode is that even if you're not a fan of Slipknot or Stone Sour, anything like that, and Corey Taylor's new project, that you'll walk away with some respect. And maybe that friend that has been listening to this kind of music and you like turn your head like, oh no, I'm never listening to that. You see why it has impacted so many. And that's what I'm hoping for this. So I really hope everybody kind of feels that same way. And if you're a huge fan of Slipknot, I hope that you enjoy this as well. That's the goal too. And that you find something that resonates with you. So we're going to get into the impact that Slipknot has had on metal and just the music community in general. And I know some of you also are going to say, oh, as far as metal, I can name 10 other bands that are more heavier than them. Absolutely and probably. But we have to say what they were a part of. Um, but I think this iconic band, they're just so amazing and the impact they have had on that music community. And I think being this age of 37 that I am, I can tell you so many that growing up, if anyone around me was into heavier music, Slipknot was definitely that favorite for so many reasons. And I think so many thought of them as this scary and untouchable band. And if you didn't look a certain way, for sure. But in reality, this band has saved so many who felt like they were finally being seen in a world that had a lot of judgment for so many reasons. And we still have that. But I just felt at that time growing up, for sure. And if you like Slipknot, you were cast as this outsider, weird, or something, someone that just didn't belong. And I hated that growing up. And that people looked at anyone in a Slipknot t-shirt this way. And I mean, how was it in your high school, Justine? Like, did you feel the same way? Like, if people, or if they were all in black, or they looked like they listened to Slipknot, or again, had that Slipknot shirt on, did you see like anyone kind of have judgment at all?
Well, I was pretty much categorized in that because I wore all black and wore, the big giant trip pants and whatnot. So I was kind of ruled in a lot with a lot of them. But yeah, it was pretty prominent in my school for the most part. Um, there was, however, one kid that didn't really get thrown into the whole category that I know was really into them them and other metal bands, honestly. He was a kid on the football team and he was into um, Rammstein and
Mhm.
Slipknot and, any kind of metal band that you can think of. He was into them, and he was pretty popular and athletic, but he was one of the only ones that were always like was ever nice to me.
Mhm. Right, yes,
I
100%.
otherwise, like, the rest of the people that were in that kind of category were not nice to me and said I was weird and, like, you know, probably into Satan and stuff like that, but he was,
Mhm.
like, the rare exception, and I feel like that could be common too in a lot of places where you have one person that doesn't really fit with the usual aesthetic of it, and that was this kid, but yeah, for the most part, I think even if you were all black, that and you looked like me or one of my friends in high school, it was assumed that you liked metal and Slipknot, which wasn't always the case. I liked them, of course, it's gotten I've opened myself up to them even more so now than when I was younger, but, it was pretty much always assumed that if you wore all black and wore the big trip pants that you listened to metal pretty much on the regular.
Oh, yeah, and it's wild to think about that, and, like, as you said, like, that person being so nice to you, 9 times out of 10, the people in those crowds are the people that, like my high school was very grouped in groups, like, you would have I mean, I hate to say it, like, you had
Yeah.
the jocks, you had these type of kids or those type of and people would, like, say things, and it's those were the kindest people, and I think even just thinking back and getting back to the impact of Slipknot, like, I think about when they entered the metal world or just music world in general, they were just something completely different than anyone was used to, and whether you thought that because of their masks, or, their jumpsuits that they would wear on stage, which was a big FU to the music industry, and I think a lot of people, maybe they didn't know this, but I found this out, um, a while back too, to where they would have, like, the barcode on their jumpsuits, and it was almost like we're a product of this music industry, and we're a product, we're being sold, and I loved that because for a long time, I had no idea, admittedly, and I think looking at that just added to where I had a lot of respect for them, and, they were just had this chaotic sound, and, I mean, you can go back and talk about their iconic record, Iowa, which any Slipknot fan will talk about, and they should. I mean, that was just something that really took off, especially with the music that was going on at that time, and they just really made this huge statement on music that I don't think I'll ever forget, and I'll be in my friend's car, and I remembered being in his car all those years ago and Wait and Bleed came on and thinking like, "What the hell is this?" Like, I like this, and I was young, I don't know, like, maybe middle school, like, I'd have to go back and look, I mean, if that's dating me, but and it just grabbed my attention because, again, it was something that I had never heard of before or was presented to me the way it was, and I later saw the impact on so many, in particular, like, men around me in school and beyond, and early on in their career, they were just criticized for so much, and now they're just this absolutely legendary band, and they're going to be in that Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, like 110%, like at some point. And I mean, we talk about certain bands that were impacted, like the band Loathe has said that when they first began, Slipknot was a heavy influence for them, and how, there was no face to their music and it was just the masks and it was only the music to absorb. And no one was really doing that. And the vocal style of Corey Taylor and just being able to switch off those styles has influenced them so much. Because when you think of Slipknot, like they'll have those moments where they're so explosive, but then you'll have it where Corey Taylor just can bring it back a little bit and it's not as explosive. And I think that's what's so special about them and really set them apart. And again, we can talk about bands like Code Orange, Vane FM, we can think about and they wouldn't be here without Slipknot. And now Code Orange is one of the most prominent in contemporary metal world. And that's insane to think about, like their younger selves being into Slipknot and now being this massive force. um, but again, like to kind of go back to Iowa, like it really challenges real pain and fear and doesn't hold back from highlighting the mistakes on that journey. And Slipknot was a force for the misunderstood and angry and just confused at that time. And when I look back in that time in the world, and you can see why they became so massive and what we've all just been through in our years of living. Um, but yeah, like Justine, what do you think about their impact? Like maybe like where you grew up or just like even now, like looking back, what do you think of that?
I think they just had such an impact, in particular with like millennials getting into
Mhm.
metal. Um, they had that shock factor that we all loved in the 90s and like early 2000s because, of course, of the creepy mask and
Mhm.
how their life shows were. And not knowing who was behind the mask just made us curious, but in turn, it terrified our parents.
Yes.
Uh, a, a visual representation can be just as important to music to help get the message across, and they definitely nailed it in that aspect. Um, I feel how their look is what sometimes drew people to check them out further. You would love a song, and then you would see how they looked in all their mask, and you were just like, okay, I need to figure out the story behind this band and more about their music. And like they weren't the first necessarily to wear masks and put on like a crazy live show because like what first came to mind for me was like Gore. Uh,
Yeah.
you know,
I'm shocked I didn't
yeah.
pick up on that because
And
100%.
right. And they came first, of course. And I'm
Mhm.
sure there were a couple other bands. That's just the first band that came to my mind. And but I feel like for us as millennials, they really showed that you can be more than just, you know, a visual representation for music. It's more than that. It's more than their face. It's about the message they want to get out to the masses. And I think they did a perfect job of it.
Oh, I think, yeah, and you think you said that perfectly because that's the thing too. Like, I think a lot of people, even when I talked about doing this episode, right? Like, a lot of people are like, oh, Slipknot or oh, this. And I think, again, like, if you're not a fan, that's okay. You don't have to like everything that comes out. But I think it was just so important because somewhere there's that kid out there that's listening to Slipknot, maybe even right now, and being saved and finding that. And it's like, that's why it's important to say, like, we shouldn't have judgment of anyone or artist that just looks a certain way. Of course, you can have any judgment you want, but maybe be a little open. Like, if this person's coming to you and says, hey, this band has saved my life, or this band makes me feel great, to maybe be like, you know what, it's not for me, but maybe there's something deeper there. And I think, I mean, even Corey Taylor said that the overall message of Slipknot was you can take something and really ugly and make it beautiful. And that's their message. And I guarantee a lot of people have no idea that that's their message. I mean, I'm sure any Slipknot fan listening to this, but like people I know that don't listen to them, I'm sure they have no idea. They're just like, yeah, right, okay. Um, so yeah, no, that's another reason. And Guar, oh my God, so many memories
But
with
oh
Guar.
my gosh, 4. Yes.
Anybody that's gone to Riot Fest, you've had blood on you,
Oh yeah.
110%. And I think, just to we've gotta put out a couple notable tracks, and I mean, I have some favorites of Slipknot, and I think for me, like, just really diving deep into them leading up to this too is like, wow, like, how many different songs do I actually like? And one was the Heretic Anthem. Like, the first song I really dove into from Iowa, and I know someone out there is like, "Of course, from Iowa." Yeah, I know this, but maybe someone listening doesn't know. And still to this day, like, it just oh, it just is like if I'm driving and I'm in traffic, it is just everything, and I gotta give it up again to Wait and Bleed because that's the first song I ever heard from them, being in my friend's car and just I mean, it was actually his van, and I just remember, and he was that typical kid that loved Slipknot, and I think had I not crossed paths with him, I don't know how I would have given them a chance and, been into that, but I've always been gravitated to music like that, and, you know, um, I always say too with their track Before I Forget, if you aren't pumping your hand to where it's like, I'm not even gonna sing it, I'm not gonna do it. I'm not Corey Taylor. That's not why I'm here. But that and everyone knows when you see them in that song and it just is like, and even Corey Taylor does it on stage, it's that rush of adrenaline. And then another track like I love so much by them, and it's called Snuff, and it's to a lot of many claim that this was supposed to be a Stone Sour song, and of course, if for any reason you're listening to this, Stone Sour was, the other project of Corey Taylor, much different than Slipknot. I'll have a link below if you're someone that hasn't listened to it, because it's amazing, but this wasn't, and Corey Taylor has said it many times too, like, this was not a Stone Sour song, in reality, it was just great to see a song like this from Slipknot, and especially with their crowds wanting that heavy, aggressive Slipknot, and for them to put something out like this under their name and no, not being a Stone Sour song and just being them. I think that was really great to hear. And just like, again, you can hear what Corey Taylor, I think, and Slipknot, why a lot of people gravitate towards them because they're just so raw and real. I mean, you gotta give it up to Custer too. Like, that song again, I know it's all over TikTok and people love or hate that. That song is everywhere, and it's just something you gotta have out there. Vermilion, Duality, Eyeless, like, I guess I could just go on with the songs, but I think when you go back, I think even people that maybe didn't give this band a chance, if you go back and listen, you would be surprised that there are probably some songs that you really enjoy that you didn't think of, or like in a movie or just something, and I think their catalog is massive, and I just think I know they're still doing it and just still one of the best in the game. I mean, just 100%, and I mean, Justine, what are any of your, like, notable songs or, uh, anything you can think of Slipknot related?
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about some of my favorites. Some of them you've already mentioned, but
I figured. I
um,
was like, "Oh, man, I
yeah,
probably took
I'm
some."
just like, of course, but no, it's fine. I think people know that of us by now. Like a
Yeah.
lot of times, we have a lot of shared likes. Like I've always loved Duality. I've talked about being like full of rage as a teen, and I always bottled up my emotions, and like especially being undiagnosed autistic. Like that's what we do. We bottle up everything. Um and it would eat at me. And so this song just really still helps tap into those feelings a lot. I also love psychosocial.
Yes, same.
And I have read that apparently the song is more than likely about like government and soldiers, and I can definitely see that with the lyrics, but it's also just a song that I get really into if I'm really upset and frustrated. Um, there's People Equal Shit.
Yes.
Um, it's so good.
Yep.
And I'm someone who constantly has trouble with getting perceived the wrong way. It really will eat at me, and someone who gets used a lot over the years. I have been treated terribly by people over the years, and I'm introverted, and I definitely have a huge love hate relationship when it just comes to people in general because of all of it. And so this song for me just really, really hits hard. And then of course Custer, which yes, it's all over TikTok, like you mentioned, and but oh my gosh, I can't help it. But that song comes on, I turn into a different person and I get really pumped. And again, as somebody who deals with being mistreated by people and like needing to have an outlet for that, like that song really does it for me. And I love it. No matter how much it's played all over TikTok, I still just absolutely love that song.
Oh, oh, 100%. Like, I love like, even before, like, whenever it shows up on my most listened or on repeat in my Apple CarPlay, I'm just like, I I feel like I've been lucky enough to see I saw Slipknot once, and it was at a festival, obviously, but, I saw them, and it was like they played that, they played, um wait, like, they played back to back. It was Custer, and I wanna say oh God. Maybe it was Wait and Bleed, but it was something, and the crowd was I don't think I'll ever see a performance like that. I mean, the closest I in most insane performance, like, would either be the band Fever 333 with, but or Guar. Like, I
Yeah.
think of those bands, like, I just I Slipknot is just in a league of their own, and their songs, if not everybody in the crowd is like where you say that, like, customer is, like, getting you pumped up and everything, like, I think, like, those in the crowd, you see that, and just how massive this band is. There's so many people where, like, even at Riot Fest they played recently, a lot of people were seeing them for the first time, um, and just to check them out, and it was just, like, people were left like, "Holy shit," and, like, this band's been together how long, and they're still just as great, and the people have grown with them, so I think that's so cool. Um, and it's like we've gotta break it down with talking about the importance of music and mental health, and I think there is no better band, to really talk about than Slipknot and Corey Taylor as an individual, and Corey Taylor is he's such a warrior for mental health and in the mental health community. And he's just such a huge advocate. And we could go on. And I know this is no secret to any fan, but I just wanted to make sure that we highlight for anyone unfamiliar that his work, as well as Slipknot as a whole. So I think it was just so important because I think some people didn't really know that, but, Corey Taylor has just been through so much and is always so open about his struggles with his mental health and how he overcame addiction and some pretty awful things in his life, and to kind of put it lightly, I mean, it just he's not always steered away from allowing people to know that they weren't alone. And whether it was on stage, a video message, an interview, he has always made people not feel like a coward or not alone. And I mean, from being sexually assaulted at such a young age and hearing how young he was and the impact on anyone, but a lot of men, not just in the music industry, but you're basically told to buck up, boys don't cry, boys don't show emotion, and I cannot imagine all that he's been through and all that he has been able to share with us, and just dealing with all of that and carrying that with him, and at a time when it was really taboo, like like I said, you didn't talk about these things, and yet him and Slipknot were talking about these things, and I can't imagine just what that was like, and I forever respect Slipknot and Corey Taylor for being able to be open, and it just I think it means so much more to any male fan of theirs that is out there. I mean, and female, any fan, but I think there is still such a huge stigma for male mental health, and to have a band such as that looks like Slipknot, sounds like Slipknot, get up there and preach how important it is to take care of yourselves, and it just is such an incredible thing, and I mean, there's so many countless videos of proof of that, there's a therapist video, I can't remember the actual call, maybe it's just called Therapist, but it was, on Noisy, and it's a must watch if you are a fan. I'm sure so many people have, but if for any reason you haven't, I'll have the link. It's just a powerful thing, and Corey Taylor really dives deep into what he's been through, and when we talk about Slipknot, you talk about Clown, and I mean, in general, what they've done for mental health. And after the deaths of Chris Cornell of Soundgarden, and then Chester Bennington of Linkin Park, uh, really opened up about what must be done about male mental health, how we can't start losing everybody, and what needs to happen, whether it is access for all, the stigma, and whatnot. But I thought it was really notable that again, Slipknot is up there talking about these two figures that we've lost in music, and definitely, I mean, Chester, again, heavy music and how important that is. And uh, again, like I commend Slipknot for being able to do that on stage, and again with Corey Taylor, he has his foundation that is named after his grandfather, the Taylor Foundation, and it's dedicated to PTSD. And I love that Corey has had and has this incredible foundation. And not only that, but he's taking time to educate people on PTSD and what it is, what it's not. And I know that it was heavily focused like on the military, for veterans because his grandfather was one, but also the fact that he, and our police officers, but he really has been showing that it's not just them and it's everybody too, and what PTSD is. And I think a lot of people are really uh, misunderstood on that topic. So I just think it's wonderful. And I think what they stand for is so incredible what they do in the terms of mental health. And I think, again, another huge reason for doing this episode. But I mean, I guess I could just gush about that. But Justine, what do you think in terms of as far as mental health that maybe they have done?
Yeah, I think like it's one reason why like a lot of the older generations have been scared of them is like
Mhm.
the lyrics are just true raw feelings.
Yeah.
And when you battle mental illness in any capacity, those words are true emotions that people go through. And if you're not open or you don't go through it, um, it's terrifying for people on the outside to hear those kinds of words. And but it's also why it's so important to have an outlet through music when it comes to feelings and thoughts like this. And that's what Slipknot is doing. And yeah, it sounds scary, but if you've been through anything mental illness wise, you have felt this in some way. It's come across your mind, and sometimes it sounds really like mean and like evil like, but the best way of getting that out is through music, and that's what they're doing, and it's helping a lot of people because it's like, your mind is you're at just at battle with your mind, and sometimes the words that are said in your mind aren't very nice. And they sound very scary, especially if somebody doesn't go through that. And yeah, that's just how I kind of see it as, and how I've always kind of taken their music as.
Yeah, and 100%. I think that's what a lot of people though too. I think they don't realize that such music can be so cathartic and that some of the things they're hearing, and I just can't help but hear how so many of these fans probably feel the same way. Um, and one of the things I always respected about Clown was that he was always preaching about the people around you, and you may not know what they're thinking. So it's just so nice to like, check in on people. And I think that's such a good reminder to have is check in on people. And I think that people just have to stick with that. And there's a lot of stigma um against doctors, therapists, and hospitals sometimes, because especially if you have like a bad situation. We all go through a couple therapists. Even Corey Taylor has said, I've gone through, usually you're at a therapist, and that's all they can help you. And then you kind of move on to the next one. And then, or it just doesn't mesh well. And I love that they've been open as that as well of like, hey, like this is a work in progress. And um, I think it's so important to have these bands that are so um massive and maybe loud, or I mean, I guess what some people think are scary, and they just have this message of that's why these shows are selling out. That's why their crowds are still massive all these years later. That's why you still see even little kids with their parents going to Slipknot shows, like I love to see that. And I think the more we just understand that maybe if something isn't for us, that's cool, but music like this matters. And again, I know I said it before, but it just so I think any heavier music just gets such a bad rap. And I think if we took the time to see what it could do for someone and having these figures whether you're just a Corey Taylor fan, or you're a Slipknot fan, you can see that, and especially them being men. Like, there's just such a stigma over men's mental health, and I think it's so important, and I I just think it's really incredible to have them be so open, and I've always just had so much respect, not only for, Slipknot, but for their fans, and that they have something and that outlet. Because if you don't have that outlet, you can feel so lost, and I think it is. Um I mean, we've talked about bands all the time, like, that we love, and I know there's probably some people on this podcast that are like, "Oh, maybe I don't like that," or, "Oh, it's not for me," but for us, like, that's how we got through our shit, like, that's how we get through it, and I just think oh, it's just so important, and again, I feel like we could go on about the importance of a band like this and what they mean to so many people, and I think if you even fell off the Slipknot train because 'cause you're like, "They're not heavier anymore, they're not." They're they're like, and I think, Justine, we've said this, like, off camera or off recording, where it's like,
Yeah.
you've got some people are gonna be like, "Oh, that's not really metal, that's the
Yeah.
girly metal," and
Yeah. Was it girly pop metal that I
yeah,
think I've seen online a lot.
and it's just
And yeah, just the fact that we were told we were going to be a poser podcast for having this
Oh,
episode.
oh, yes. Yeah, 100%, yeah. I mean, side note, yes, when I first tried to do this episode, I was told I was a poser podcast by a Slipknot fan, so if you're somehow listening to this, thank you, because 'cause we're still putting this out there. Um And something too, like, I mean, like, with Corey Taylor's foundation that he has, there's actually, like, this puppy thing where, puppy foundation, center that he has partnered with, that basically, military veterans, they will give well-bred and professionally trained service dogs. And I think really deals with, like, PTSD and any physical mobility impairments. They will make sure that maybe they have a service dog to help them, and I think that's incredible too. Like, I think there's so much work that this band has done, and I think for so many fans, because as much as that Poser podcast comment happened, there were a lot of people that were like, "Corey Taylor saved my life," and I think, and Slipknot as a whole has gotten me out of the darkest times, and there were some people that messaged me all those months back when I thought of doing this episode, and have expressed that they would not be here today without Slipknot. And I think that's the most important thing. And I think that's why it was so important to do this episode, and so important to highlight that, because I think a lot of people had no clue what they've done for mental health and how they are huge mental advocates. And maybe you're someone shaking your head right now, like, "Oh, duh, of course, or shutting it off, Okay, well, I'll see you later then." But it's so it's so important. And I think, yeah, I could just gush. Like, for me, and I think it was also important for us, because I think it is
Yeah.
important to have the female representation, that you can like heavier music, even if it's not Slipknot.
Yeah,
If you're into
exactly.
anything, like if you're into Motionless in White, if you are into um that Better Lovers band that's out, Dillinger Escape Plan, if you're into any, or you are into Metallica, which a lot of people like to say they are girly metal too now, uh, which are the fathers of metal as well. But it's like, when you think of that and people have something to say, it's so good to also show that female representation, that you can be a girl and like this music. And
Oh yeah.
Slipknot has been big in my life, and I was always told too, like, I couldn't like them, or it was the other way, where they were the most embracing people I've ever met in my life as far as the fans. One of the safest crowds I've been in, like, and someone's going to argue with me again, like, "Oh, then you weren't really in the crowd." No, people took care of you in those crowds, and they were incredible. And it was such a almost like religious experience to go through that. And it was a great time, and I'll never forget that. But it was really important to show that we can have admiration for Slipknot and enjoy it, even though we are 2 women on here on this podcast.
Yeah. I think if anything, it just added fuel to our fire. And whenever we were
Yes.
getting the doubtful comments, it's like, oh, you don't think we can talk about this? We're gonna talk about it now, and we're going to, like, get real into it, like, just because we're girls doesn't mean we can't enjoy harder music.
Mhm.
If anything, like, there is, in particular, there is a singer, in a band, the band's called Ginger, and it's a female fronted metal band, and just because you might think of a girl as being girly or like never getting into anything harder doesn't mean that we can't or that we shouldn't. Um, Females and female presenting are allowed in every space and every scene and every music. So, yeah, we felt it was very necessary to make sure this episode happens. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll just give a shout out to this other podcast that I listen to that's on Knotfest. I don't know if anyone's listening to this that listens to them, but they're called She's with the Band, and I love that Tori and Alicia are killing it on there and kind of bringing light to the idea of that women deserve a place and highlighting the amazing women in heavy music. And I think that's so important. So yeah, I'll go ahead and plug them, and
Yeah.
that would be a dream to ever talk to any of those two girls because they're out there killing it. And I think that's so cool. And again, shout out to Knotfest for recognizing that. And again, that speaks to Slipknot and Knotfest that they support that. So that's incredible. So again, this was just such an important episode for us to do, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, I know you'll let us know. I mean, I know it.
I'm sure we'll hear about it.
Again, like I'm not shy about it. I grew up listening to heavy music. I whether it was in a basement, I huge Dillinger Escape Plan fan. And I think I always gravitated towards like Norma Jean, and any of those types of music. I was just converge. Like I mean, I can name so many of them that I really, really enjoyed. And I think it just, I would have a lot of people tell me that that can't be saving me, or that's too loud, or how do you understand what they're saying, or
Yeah.
anything like that. So it was really, really important to show that and kind of heal that inner child of mine. Like, yeah, you did the right thing. You were into that and you're still into that. Even if I listen to other bands now, like you'll see in our episodes, we have many different styles. And I think that's what's so cool. So again, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. You can head over to our website as noted before, but if for some reason you skipped that because you're like, I've heard this intro a million times, you can head over to our website at www.stereotherapypod.com and check us out, say hi again, all that good stuff. And you can head over to our Instagram at stereo.therapy and you can add us, talk to us, say hi. And just, yeah, especially if you're a Slipknot fan, I would love to hear how this band has impacted you. And we want to hear that. Like, how have they made an impact on your life? Because I know so many have. Anyone listening to this from TikTok, you've definitely let me know, and I love that. So keep those stories because I love to hear it. Even the Poser podcast guy, I hope you're listening to this somehow. I do. I told you it was coming. But yeah, all jokes aside, guys, thanks again for listening. We will see you guys next Tuesday. And also check out Slipknot, giving them a chance. If you have not, if you thought they were scary, maybe listening to this and what huge mental health advocates they are. I'd love for you to check them out again. Maybe give them another chance, judgment free, do it in your house, whatever, in your car, on the highway, whatever. But check out Slipknot and we will see you guys next Tuesday. Bye, guys.
Bye.